Welcome to the Midnight Codex, where forgotten truths breathe and shadows tell their tale. Tonight, don't blink and don't look behind you.
I sat on the edge of my bed, the letter trembling in my hands. The envelope was clean. No return address. Just my name, John Marshall, scribbled across the front in uneven handwriting. Something about it unsettled me. It looked like my name, but somehow it didn't feel like it belonged to me. I stared at it for a long time before I finally tore it open. I didn't know what I expected, but I knew one thing. I was desperate. Inside, the message was brief, just a few lines of cold, impersonal text. We have a position available for you, a night guard position at an abandoned asylum. You will be paid well. If you accept, you'll be asked to follow a set of instructions. No name, no signature, just an address, buried somewhere deep in the woods, far away from anything familiar. I sat there for a moment, the letter in my lap, my chest tight. Months of silence, months of rejection. I could feel the last of my hope slipping through my fingers. The layoffs had left me with nothing. My savings were almost gone, and I hadn't held a steady job in over a year. I hated where I was, stuck, suffocating. But this offer? It didn't feel right either. Still, the money. It was tempting. Too tempting. With a numb sense of surrender, I stuffed the letter into my pocket and grabbed my keys. As soon as I stepped outside, the cold hit me. My apartment felt colder than usual, emptier somehow, like it already knew I wouldn't be coming back the same. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what I was walking into. But I needed this. I needed something. Anything. The road was long and dark, winding through thick forest. The deeper I drove, the more the trees seemed to crowd the road, like they were closing in on me. Their branches reached out like claws, scraping against the fog-heavy sky. Mist blanketed everything, wrapping the world in a cold hush. My headlights barely cut through it. Every turn I made felt more distant, more isolated. I kept my hands tight on the wheel, trying not to think. But every so often, I'd hear something. A snap of a twig. A whisper of movement in the woods. I told myself it was nothing. Eventually, I saw it. The asylum. It rose out of the fog like a forgotten relic. Ancient stone, cracked and decaying. The windows were boarded up. The roof sagged. Everything about it looked dead. And yet I felt like it was watching me. I pulled up to the rusted front gates. They groaned when I pushed them open. The courtyard beyond was still. Too still. No wind, no sound. The air pressed down on me like a weight. I paused, but I didn't stop. Then I saw him. A figure stepped out from the shadows, tall, wrapped in a heavy coat. A wide-brimmed hat covered most of his face. But when he looked at me, I felt it. Those eyes. Cold, empty, watching. "John Marshall?" he asked. His voice was rough, like it hadn't been used in years. I nodded. My throat was dry. I barely managed to speak. He didn't wait. He turned and started walking. I followed. My feet felt heavy, like the ground itself wanted to hold me back. The asylum loomed above us, larger with every step. The silence was deafening. We walked through a narrow corridor, the walls closing in. Every floorboard creaked beneath us, echoing too loud in the stillness. At the end, he opened a plain wooden door. "This is your station," he said. I stepped inside. The room was small, barren, just a desk, a chair, and a single lamp overhead. The light flickered, casting shadows that stretched and shifted like they were alive. The air smelled of mold. Old. Dead. He slid a stack of papers across the desk toward me. "Read these carefully. These are the rules." The man's voice was flat, emotionless. The cold, detached way he said it made my stomach twist. I glanced down at the papers in my hands, the edges yellowed with age. The ink was fading, almost like it was meant to be hidden. As I scanned the first few lines, an unsettling feeling crawled up my spine. "Never leave the guard station after midnight. If you hear voices in the halls, don't investigate. Do not open the locked door in the basement. Don't make eye contact with the mirrors in the east wing." I felt a shiver run through me as I read the last rule. Something about it didn't sit right. The implications of each rule were clear. They weren't just guidelines, they were warnings. Violating them wasn't an option. But what would happen if I did? I swallowed hard, wondering if I was already trapped, bound by these strange, cryptic rules. I looked up, but the man had already disappeared. The door clicked shut behind him, and the room seemed to grow colder. I stood there for a long moment, the rules in my hands, a sense of dread weighing down on me. My heart was racing, but I didn't know why. Was it fear of the unknown? Or something more? Something that was already inside the walls of this place? The wind outside howled, and I jumped. The silence that followed felt heavier, as if the walls were pressing in on me. I looked down at the papers again. Each rule seemed more ominous than the last, each one building the tension in my chest. I turned toward the door, my hand trembling as I reached for the handle. My mind screamed at me to stay. The rules were clear, but curiosity gnawed at me. What if I disobeyed? What if I broke just one rule? What could happen? But before I could make a move, I heard it. A whisper. Soft, barely audible at first, but unmistakable. It came from somewhere deep in the building. A voice, calling my name. I froze. The rules. Rule 2, don't investigate the voices. I could feel my pulse in my ears. The voice grew louder, insistent. It was calling me, but the rules were clear. I shouldn't investigate. I shouldn't even move. And yet, the urge to find out what was happening, to break the rules, was almost overwhelming. But no, I couldn't. I wouldn't. I slammed the door shut and leaned against it, my body shaking. I had to stay put. I had to obey the rules. If I didn't know what would happen. But something deep inside me told me that the very thing I was running from was already here. As the last light of day finally succumbed to the creeping darkness, the asylum seemed to transform in ways that were both subtle and terrifying. The temperature dropped suddenly, as if the building itself exhaled a cold breath, wrapping the air around me in an icy grip. I pulled my jacket tighter, but it didn't matter. The chill was different here, penetrating, suffocating, as though the very walls had absorbed the cold, and now it was bleeding out into the rooms. It clung to me, making my skin feel cold to the touch, and my breath came out in small, misty puffs. I had tried to settle into the guardroom, but it was impossible. The silence was deafening, pressing against me, filling the space with a tension I couldn't explain. My mind was already on edge, every creak of the building making me jump. Every flicker of light above my head seemed to grow louder, more pronounced. The walls felt like they were closing in around me, like the asylum was alive, breathing and watching me. My foot tapped against the floor in rhythm with the humming of the light. It felt like time was stretching, every second dragging on, every minute slipping away with an unnerving weight. I stood up, my legs aching from sitting too long. The room felt smaller, tighter, and I needed to move. I could hear the floorboards creaking under my weight, every step making the stillness feel more oppressive. Maybe a quick walk, I thought, hoping that the simple action would calm my restless mind. My eyes darted to the clock. 12:30 a.m. My stomach twisted as I glanced at the guard station door. The rules flashed in my mind, but the pull of curiosity was stronger than the voice telling me to stay put. Just a quick look around, I reassured myself. Nothing will happen. I pushed open the door, stepping out into the empty hallway. Immediately, the silence felt more suffocating. The corridor stretched out before me, dark and looming. The cold air seemed to rush past me, brushing against my skin like a whispered warning. The shadows on the walls seemed to stretch unnaturally, creeping toward me with every step I took. The hallway was empty, too empty. No sound, no movement, just the faint creak of the building shifting under the weight of time. But the silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt like it was waiting, as if something was holding its breath just out of sight. My footsteps echoed in the emptiness, each step louder than the last. My pulse quickened as I walked further down the hall, my eyes darting from one shadow to the next, half expecting something to jump out at me. I reached the east wing. and that's when I heard it. At first, it was faint, just a whisper, a sound so soft that I thought it was just my imagination. But as I strained my ears, it became clearer. There were voices, low, murmuring voices, speaking in a language I couldn't understand. They came from somewhere deeper in the asylum, somewhere hidden behind the corners of my mind. I froze. I couldn't make out the words, but they were unmistakable. Voices, I thought, my heart suddenly racing. A sense of dread washed over me, and for a moment I wondered if the asylum itself was alive, calling to me. I took a hesitant step forward, the urge to investigate almost overwhelming. What if it's a trick? What if someone needs help? My mind raced, but the rules echoed louder in my thoughts. Rule 2. Don't investigate the voices. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, as if they were calling my name. I swallowed hard, fighting the pull in my chest, the growing desire to follow the sound and uncover what lay beyond the shadows. But then, just as quickly, I remembered the warning. Don't investigate. With a shaky breath, I turned on my heel and walked back toward the guardroom. My steps felt heavier now, as if the building itself was trying to hold me in place. My heart thudded in my chest, the whispers still ringing in my ears. My skin prickled, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the building was watching me, judging me for my hesitation. I finally reached the guard station and slammed the door shut behind me, my hands shaking as I leaned against it. My breath came out in short bursts, my chest tight. The silence returned, but it was different now. It was more oppressive, more suffocating. The voices were gone, but the feeling of something else lingering in the corners of my mind was stronger than ever. I sat at the desk, my hands gripping the edge, trying to steady my racing heart. The cameras blinked in front of me, their green lights flickering as though they were struggling to stay alive in the silence. I glanced at the monitor, trying to focus on something, anything, to keep my mind from spiraling. The camera feed showed the halls, the rooms, empty as expected. Then, something caught my eye. In the basement feed, a shadow moved across the screen. At first, it was just a blur, something fleeting, too quick to be certain. But as I leaned closer, my breath catching in my throat, it became clear. A figure, tall, thin, and impossibly dark, was moving toward the locked door in the basement. My heart stopped. I stared at the screen, unable to look away. The shadow moved unnaturally, sliding across the floor like it wasn't bound by the rules of physics. It didn't walk, didn't move like a person. It glided, as if it were something other than human. My hand hovered over the camera controls. Was it a trick of the light? A glitch? Number? It couldn't be. My pulse quickened, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The figure moved. It was real. And it was moving toward the basement door, the one I had been warned about. My gaze never left the screen, but my mind raced. Why hadn't I seen this before? Why hadn't the figure appeared earlier? Was it a part of the asylum's curse, or was it something more? I couldn't be sure. All I knew was that the figure was heading toward the one place I was forbidden to go. The screen was still, empty now. The figure was gone. Had it disappeared, or was it still down there, just beyond the camera's reach? My breath quickened. I felt the weight of the silence return, thicker now. My chest tightened, and I could feel the sweat on my palms as I gripped the edge of the desk. My mind spun with the implications. I had seen something I shouldn't have. But what was it, and why it had gone toward the basement? I glanced at the clock, 12:55 a.m. The time seemed to stretch, each second an eternity. I looked back at the monitor. The hallways were empty. The cameras showed nothing. The silence was all-encompassing. But the feeling of being watched lingered, heavier than before. The questions continued to swirl in my mind. Was it the building, or something else? And why had I felt such a strong pull to investigate? One thing was certain now. I'd crossed a line. And now, whatever it was that lingered in the dark had taken notice. The night pressed on, and with each passing hour, the asylum seemed to breathe, alive with a sinister energy that wrapped itself tighter around me. The temperature had dropped even further, now so cold that the air felt like ice on my skin. My breath hung in the air like a cloud of fog, and the silence, once something I had grown used to, had now turned oppressive. Every small sound felt amplified. Every creak of the old building sounded like a footstep echoing through my mind. The lights overhead flickered and buzzed, their intermittent flashes of light casting strange, contorted shadows along the walls. Every time they blinked on, it felt as though the shadows had moved, shifted, and crept closer. I kept my eyes on the flickering bulbs, watching them dance in and out of the darkness, as if they too were struggling to stay alive. Then came the slamming doors, bang, loud and sudden, shaking the very air around me. It was like the asylum itself was protesting my presence. My stomach lurched, the air thickened, the walls felt heavier, as if the place was alive and breathing, watching. The whispers had started again, but this time they were no longer distant echoes. They seemed closer. They seemed to come from everywhere, seeping through the very walls of the asylum, curling into my ears, speaking my name. John, my heart leaped into my throat. I'd heard that voice before, hadn't I? Back in the hallways, back in the dark. It was the same voice that had called to me earlier, beckoning me forward. Only this time it was louder, more urgent, and as much as my mind screamed at me to stay put, to ignore the call, the temptation, the irresistible pull of the unknown, grew stronger with every word. The whispers weren't just haunting sounds. They were a command, a pull, like a rope tethered to my chest. They wanted me to move. Before I could stop myself, my feet were already in motion, walking down the narrow hall toward the east wing. The air grew colder with every step, the shadows stretching longer, as though the very walls themselves were trying to reach out and pull me deeper into their grip. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat louder than the last, and my breath came in short, shallow gasps. My mind raced. Don't break the rules. Don't go. But it was no use. My curiosity, the same curiosity that had led me here in the first place, overpowered my fear. I reached the east wing. The hallway here was darker, even more oppressive than the others. The light from the guard station barely stretched this far, leaving the area cloaked in near-total blackness. The whispers were so loud now, surrounding me, filling the space in a way that felt suffocating. My skin crawled. My eyes darted nervously to the walls, half expecting something to appear. And then I saw it. An old journal, its pages yellowed with age, lay open on the floor just ahead of me. The room around it felt frozen in time, and the journal seemed to pulse with an energy of its own. I knelt, my breath quickening as I reached for it. The pages were filled with frantic scrawled handwriting. The words were jagged, desperate, as though they had been written in haste, as if someone were racing against time, or against something far worse. Subjects, 42, 57, 91. They don't remember. They don't remember their names. We've changed them. Their memories are ours. Control the mind, control the soul. Mind manipulation is the key. My stomach twisted. The words on the page sent a cold wave through me. Mind control? Memory manipulation? This place had been a house of horrors, experiments on patients, on people like me. The journal was filled with disturbing details, patients whose identities had been wiped away, their minds turned into blank slates for experiments. What kind of twisted reality was this? My fingers trembled as I turned the page. The next part was more chilling than the first. Subjects who resist memory implantation are disposed of. Results are permanent. They are no longer people. They are vessels, empty. We own them. The words seemed to burn into my mind, their weight sinking in like a stone. My body felt cold all over, and my vision blurred for a moment. What had happened here? What had they done to those people, to the patients? And what did this mean for me? I wasn't just here for some menial job. I was part of something bigger, something that I couldn't even begin to understand. Suddenly, the temperature around me dropped even further, and a cold draft swept through the room, cutting through my clothing like a blade. I shivered, but it wasn't just from the cold. I could feel it then. A presence. Something watching me. Something that shouldn't have been here. I turned sharply, looking around the room, but there was no one, no sign of movement. But then I saw it. In the large mirror hanging on the wall, I caught a glimpse of my own reflection, only it wasn't quite right. My face was twisted. My eyes were wide, panicked, as if I were trapped inside my own skin. My mouth was stretched into a grotesque, inhuman smile. But it wasn't my smile. My heart skipped a beat. My mind screamed at me to look away, but I was frozen, unable to tear my eyes away from the distorted image. This wasn't me. This wasn't my reflection. The sudden realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I wasn't alone in this room. The asylum was with me, watching me through the mirror, through my own eyes. I quickly looked away, my breath coming out in sharp, panicked gasps. My mind raced. Don't look back, don't look back. But it was too late. Rule 4 had been violated. Don't make eye contact with the mirrors. And now, the damage was done. The room seemed to shift around me. The walls felt closer, the shadows darker. It was as though the very air had thickened, and I could feel the weight of it pressing against my chest. The whispers had returned, louder now, surrounding me, filling the space with a maddening chorus. I wanted to scream, to run, but my feet felt glued to the floor. The building, the asylum, was closing in on me. It was alive. The lights above flickered once again, casting strange shadows that seemed to move of their own accord, and I could hear the floorboards creak beneath me, the sound now sounding like footsteps. They were coming for me, slowly, relentlessly. I needed to leave, I needed to escape. But the door, the hallway, everything seemed farther away. The walls seemed to move, breathing in time with my own labored breaths. There's no way out. The second night crept in like a silent predator, the building growing heavier with every passing hour. My unease had reached a boiling point. The silence of the asylum was now anything but comforting. It was as though the walls themselves were alive, breathing in sync with the air around me, pulling me deeper into the web of dread. The temperature had dropped further, and I felt the icy fingers of fear crawling down my spine, tightening around me, refusing to let go. Each time I tried to rest, my mind wouldn't allow it. I heard the dragging sound again, chains scraping against the floor, far off in the distance, as though something was dragging itself across the asylum, moving closer, step by slow, deliberate step. The faint cries of anguish followed, distant but growing louder, like the broken sobs of those who had been lost in this forsaken place. But when I tried to locate the source, there was nothing. Just empty, hollow corridors stretching out into the unknown. The sounds were everywhere and nowhere. My sanity began to crack, the boundary between the real and the unreal thinning until I couldn't tell which was which anymore. The asylum was changing me. I could feel it. My thoughts, once clear and precise, now tangled in the air like webs spun by something dark. The whispers, soft at first, now filled my ears, more insistent, more commanding. They weren't just sounds, they were thoughts, my thoughts, mingling with the voices. They called my name, louder, clearer. John. My body was no longer my own. The cold, icy grip of fear twisted inside me, urging me toward the east wing once again. I tried to resist, tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, but the pull was too strong, the curiosity too overwhelming. With each second, the whispers grew louder, more urgent. And then, with a deep breath, I stepped away from the guard station. The hallway was darker now, the lights flickering with an unsettling irregularity. The light above me buzzed like an old, dying insect, casting long, jerky shadows across the floor. The walls, once simply decaying, seemed to press inward with every step I took, and the air grew thicker, more suffocating. My pulse quickened as I moved toward the east wing, the whispers becoming clearer. They weren't just whispers. They were commands beckoning me forward. I had to know what was behind it all. I had to understand why this place felt alive, why the voices wouldn't stop. The fear was drowning me, but it was nothing compared to the lure of the unknown, the desperate need to know what happened here. As I reached the hallway's end, I saw it again. The journal, discarded and forgotten, lying in the middle of the floor. It had drawn me in once before, and now it called to me once more, as if it knew I couldn't resist. My hands trembled as I knelt to pick it up. The pages were yellowed, torn at the edges. My flashlight flickered, casting brief moments of light before plunging the room into darkness once more. As I opened the journal, the frantic scribbles inside were more chaotic than before. Wild, desperate, as if the author had been in a race against time. My eyes scanned the page. Subjects: 42, 57, 91. They don't remember. We've erased them, erased their minds. We control them now. We are their masters. The mind is a fragile thing. Control it, and you control everything. Memory is nothing more than an illusion. My breath caught in my throat. The words were maddening, the implications horrifying. Mind control? Memory manipulation? What had this place become? This wasn't a hospital. It was a factory of horrors, a place where people were stripped of their very essence. Their minds were taken, twisted, and owned by those in charge. My hands shook as I read further, my eyes following the increasingly desperate scrawled words. Failed experiments must be disposed of. Those who resist will be erased completely. Their memories wiped, their will broken. I couldn't breathe. My head swam with the reality of it all. The whispers grew louder, pressing in on my mind. They were still here, the ones who had been changed by this place. They had never left. My body moved of its own accord, my feet dragging me toward the hallway beyond the journal. It was then that the temperature dropped sharply, and a cold, icy gust of air brushed against the back of my neck. I turned sharply, my heartbeat thudding in my chest, but saw nothing. The air was still, frozen, but the whispering, the voices, they were all around me now, inside my head. It wasn't just the journal that was speaking now. My eyes darted to the mirror hanging on the wall. I froze. The reflection, my reflection, looked back at me, but something was wrong. My face was pale, my eyes wide with fear, but there was something darker in my expression. It wasn't just fear, there was something other, sinister in my eyes, an expression of malice I hadn't seen before. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment it felt like the asylum itself was looking through me. I felt the cold, icy fingers of dread clutch at my heart. My reflection was smiling now, a grotesque, inhuman grin that didn't belong to me. I turned away, my head spinning. No, it can't be. But the mirror hadn't just reflected my fear, it reflected something far darker, something that had been planted inside me. The air in the room seemed to close in around me. The walls, once still, now seemed to press inward with crushing force. The shadows stretched unnaturally long, as if reaching for me. The whispers grew louder, more frantic. They weren't just words anymore. They were commands, screams, demands, and they were coming from everywhere, inside my head, from the walls, from the mirror. I was no longer alone. The temperature plummeted, the air thick with something oppressive, suffocating. My breath came in short, rapid gasps, the world spinning around me as if it were no longer real. My legs gave way, and I collapsed to my knees, the journal slipping from my hands and falling to the floor with a soft thud. In that instant, I felt it, the presence closing in on me. It was behind me. I could feel its eyes on my back, watching, waiting. The whispers were everywhere now, mingling with my thoughts. I couldn't shut them out. They were part of me. I was part of them. My eyes scanned the room, desperate to find something, anything, to anchor me. But the asylum had swallowed me whole. The darkness had taken me, and there was no escape. The asylum seemed to breathe around me as the second night stretched on, each second more suffocating than the last. My mind, once sharp and rational, now felt brittle, fragile, as though it was shattering into 1,000 pieces. Time had no meaning anymore. The hours were distorted, stretching, warping. Each moment felt like an eternity. And yet, time raced on, mocking me. The walls, once solid, now seemed to move, undulating as if they were alive, feeding off my fear, tightening their grip on me. The whispers had become a constant presence, echoing through the halls, now so close they sounded as though they were coming from inside my head. John ... The sound of my name was like a needle in my skull, piercing, insistent. Every corner I turned, the air felt thicker, colder, as if the building was trying to suffocate me, pulling me deeper into its grasp. I couldn't escape it. The whispers weren't just outside, they were inside, buried in my thoughts, merging with my own fears, my own insecurities. I couldn't tell what was real anymore. The patients I had seen earlier, their pale, gaunt faces, their eyes vacant, lifeless, were now everywhere. They wandered the halls in slow, deliberate steps, their bodies bent in unnatural angles, as though they were puppets on invisible strings. Their faces were hollow, their eyes dark, empty of any recognition. And yet they looked at me. They saw me, but they were beyond me, beyond time. They had been here forever, trapped in the asylum's grasp, and I knew, deep down, that I was no different from them. The asylum was consuming me. It was changing me, twisting me into something else. They never leave. The thought slithered into my mind like a poison, and for a brief, fleeting moment, I could feel myself being pulled into the same endless loop that had claimed all the others. My chest tightened. I could feel my own identity unraveling, being wiped away piece by piece. I needed to leave. I had to get out. But the door to the guard station, the door to the outside world, felt miles away. The shadows in the halls seemed to stretch, curling around me, pulling me further into the maze of the asylum. Each step felt like it was leading me deeper, farther from reality. I had to know. The basement door. The one I'd been warned about. The one that held the answers. My mind screamed at me to turn back, but my body moved of its own accord, drawn to the locked door like a moth to a flame. With shaking hands, I pried the crowbar into the rusted lock, the metal scraping against metal with a sound that seemed to reverberate through the very walls. The door creaked open slowly, and cold air rushed out to greet me, a wave of damp, fetid air that smelled of rot and decay. I stepped into the basement, my breath shallow, my heart pounding. The room was claustrophobic, suffocating. The air was thick, heavy with the stench of old blood and the remnants of something far worse. My flashlight flickered and cast long, flickering shadows across the walls. The floor was littered with discarded tools, scalpels, saws, syringes, all stained with dark, dried blood. But it wasn't the tools that made my stomach turn. It was the symbols. Crude, desperate markings carved into the walls, some of them looking like they had been made by trembling hands, others jagged and deep, like something trying to tear its way out of the stone. I felt my pulse quicken, a sense of dread creeping up my spine. I should turn back. But something was pulling me deeper into the room. Something was calling to me. And then I saw it. The figure emerged. From the darkness, stepping into the weak beam of my flashlight. A man. A patient, perhaps. He was thin, emaciated, his body pale and skeletal, barely held together by skin stretched too tight over his bones. His eyes were wide, hollowed out by terror and madness, but they saw me. They were locked onto me. My breath caught in my throat. The man's mouth moved, but no sound came out. It was like the very air had been sucked away from him, his words caught in a void between us. He stepped forward, his hands reaching out, but his body was slow, uncoordinated, like a marionette. His eyes, those haunting, pleading eyes, locked with mine, and for a moment it felt as though the room had vanished. There was no space, no time. There was only the man, standing there, begging without saying a word. My body tensed. I wanted to scream, to run, but my feet were frozen, my mind too overwhelmed by what I was seeing. The man's fingers twitched, the faintest movement reaching for me. Then, in a flash, the figure vanished, gone like smoke, dissipating into the air as though it had never existed. My mind reeled. My chest tightened as my breath came in ragged gasps. My hands trembled uncontrollably, and my eyes darted around the room, searching for any sign of the man. There was nothing. No trace. The room was empty again. But the feeling was still there. The presence of the man, the presence of something else. something that had been watching me. I stumbled backward, my mind spiraling. The air was thick now, suffocating, and the shadows in the corners of the room seemed to grow, shifting, stretching toward me. The whispers came again, louder this time, more urgent. I backed into the wall, my hands against the cold stone, my chest rising and falling erratically as I struggled to catch my breath. What had I seen? What was that thing? Was it a ghost? A memory? Or was it just my mind cracking under the pressure? My reflection in the small, cracked mirror in the corner of the room caught my eye. At first, I didn't notice anything wrong, but then it smiled at me. It wasn't a smile like my own, but something other. My reflection twisted, contorted, its grin widening in a grotesque mockery of me. My eyes, those eyes, followed me, a darkness behind them that made my skin crawl. My own reflection, mocking me, sneering at me. A cold, icy shiver shot down my spine. My own reflection was no longer my own. It was something else. I turned away, my heart slamming in my chest, but the reflection didn't go away. It was there, lingering in the corner of my vision, watching me. The room seemed to close in tighter, the air thickening, and I couldn't breathe. The asylum was no longer just a place. It was a living, breathing entity, and I had become a part of it. The asylum had become a prison, a living, breathing nightmare, suffocating me with every passing second. The weight of the building pressed in on me, its walls closing tighter and tighter around my mind. Time had no meaning here. The hours felt like hours, and minutes felt like years. The air thickened with every step, every breath. There was no escape, no end in sight. The walls were no longer just made of stone. They were alive, watching, pulling me deeper into the suffocating web of dread. My heart hammered against my ribs. The whispering had returned. Louder now, my whispering. It was as if the asylum had found a way to get inside my head, twisting my thoughts, blurring the lines between what was real and what wasn't. The voices, once faint, were now commanding. John, you cannot leave. You belong to us. It was too much. The terror, the realization that I wasn't just trapped in the asylum. I was part of it, part of its nightmare, and the rules that had held me here, bending me, suffocating me. I had to break them. I had to get out. If I didn't, I knew I would lose myself forever. My mind screamed as I made my way down the hall. The asylum fought back at every turn. Doors slammed shut behind me. Windows that had once been open were now sealed. The exits, the escape routes, vanished before my eyes. It was as though the building was a creature, and it had claimed me. I had broken its rules, and now it was claiming its prize. I ran. My footsteps echoed in the empty halls, the sound distorted, bouncing off the walls as though the asylum itself was toying with me, taunting me. Every corner, every door I approached felt like it was pushing me back, forcing me to stay. My fingers ached as they gripped the handles of locked doors, pulling and twisting, but they wouldn't open. I punched at windows, but they stayed sealed, mocking me, trapping me. The asylum was alive, feeding on my fear, growing stronger with every attempt to escape. My thoughts were frenzied, scattered. My mind raced with the need to get out, to break free. But it was like running in place, my feet moving faster and faster while the world around me stood still. I reached the front door, the one I had once believed would be my freedom. I grabbed the handle, my hands shaking, but it didn't budge. The door was locked, as if the asylum itself had sealed me in, like a trapped animal, its prey. The walls closed in on me. The building groaned, the air thickening as I turned to look around. My eyes darted to the walls, and that's when I saw it. The hallway, the door, the entire room. It had changed. I had passed through this same place before, but now the walls were different. The door was the same, but the feeling in the air was not. It was thicker, heavier, like the asylum had shifted, reset, trapping me once again. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. The familiar door had become just another trap, another illusion designed to keep me locked inside. I couldn't tell how long I'd been trying to leave, How many times I had walked these halls, but it felt like forever. The reality around me was warping. The asylum wasn't just a place. It was something else, something alive. And it wasn't going to let me go. My chest tightened. My head was spinning. I needed to get out. My hands gripped the door again, my heart racing, and I pulled it open. The night air greeted me with an almost euphoric relief. The cold wind cut through me, a sharp, bitter taste of freedom. The scent of fresh air filled my lungs. The weight of the asylum lifted for the first time. I had done it. I had escaped. But as my foot touched the ground outside, I felt a sickening wave of déjà vu wash over me. The gates, the ones I had just passed through, were still in front of me, closed. The air, once so refreshing, now felt heavy again. The night sky above me was still as dark as before, and the trees stood motionless, as though time itself had paused. I turned back to the asylum, my stomach sinking. The building loomed in front of me, the gates closed. The entrance, the exit I had just come through was now locked. The feeling of relief I had briefly felt evaporated, replaced by the same suffocating dread that had followed me throughout the asylum. I had left, hadn't I? The front door had opened. I had stepped through it. But now, standing here, outside, I realized I was still here. The building, the asylum, was still the same, but it was different. Something had shifted. Time had reset. Everything was the same, yet nothing was. I reached for the gates again, my hands trembling, pulling at the bars, but they didn't move. They were solid, unyielding. The feeling in the air was thick with inevitability. The asylum had won. I backed away, my mind racing. I turned toward the front door, my hands reaching for the handle once more. The door opened without resistance, but when I stepped through, I found myself back inside the same hallway. Back at the same place. The asylum had trapped me once again. No, this can't be happening. Not again. The asylum had already begun to claim me. I stumbled backward, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The walls around me closed in tighter, the shadows stretching longer, and the whispers began once more. But they weren't whispers anymore. They were voices, my own voice, my name, calling to me, beckoning me back. Stay with us. You'll never leave. You belong to us now. As the doors locked behind me again, the harsh, cold grip of reality slipped away, and I was left standing in the same place, a prisoner of the asylum's endless nightmare. My heart slammed against my ribs. I was caught. There was no escape. The building refused to let me go. The door had opened. I had stepped outside. But this wasn't real. It was all a trap. The asylum was playing its twisted game. The door had closed behind me once again. When I turned back, I was back inside. It had started again. The asylum had me now. There was no escape. Only the endless loop.